Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today's May 2nd, 2023. And let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? Guys, apologies. I haven't made that many videos in the last few weeks. I can confirm that I'm feeling much better, and I am going to try to get back to a more regular schedule. Also, I think it's good because there haven't been that many eventful moments in the last few weeks in terms of movements and changes. The only place where there was really a lot of attacks is obviously Bakhmut, but that's the only exception. So I'm glad to be back, and there is no better time to get back into it than in May because we're all waiting impatiently for this Ukrainian counteroffensive to happen. Now, I said it could start as early as the beginning of this month to mid-May, but Ukraine really has the psychological and time advantage over the Russians, who are anxiously waiting for this counteroffensive to start, and they don't know when. And Ukraine is really playing well here to stretch it out as long as possible, right? Even if it starts in June or July, it doesn't matter. The Russians are going to be fearful and anxious because, well, as I'm going to show you in my slides, that they failed, and they failed very badly to prove that they're capable of pushing further past what they gained last year in the summer. Now, what I pulled off here, as you can see, is just a weather update so we can understand when could potentially Ukraine start doing their offensive. You can see that in Bakhmut, so the first image here, in the next couple of days, it's going to be quite warm. So today, obviously, the temperature is at night, so it's about 9 to 10 degrees, but you can see that tomorrow it's going to be 19, Thursday is going to be 22, Friday 22 degrees, Saturday and the weekend is going to be a little bit colder. But you can see that the weather is becoming warmer and warmer. The thaw is completely gone, and so now summer is officially kicking in. So that's why I'm expecting that by mid-May to even end of May, we should start seeing a lot of movement from the Ukrainian side. And in Melitopol, you can see that the weather is about the same, just a little bit warmer. Usually the south of Ukraine is just a little bit warmer. So this is in Zaporizhia, in the south of Ukraine. And so I just picked Melitopol, very central city, and just a little bit hotter, but it follows the same pattern of just getting warmer and warmer. Just the weekend is going to be a little bit colder, but compared to April, which was very wet, soggy, this is a clear improvement, obviously. And so we're going to start seeing a lot of movement on the Ukrainian side in the next couple of weeks for sure. And obviously, we've also been witnessing a lot of Ukraine activity. Last week there's been a major explosion in Crimea. One of the oil refineries was hit by the Ukrainians. A lot more explosions in Melitopol, Zaporizhia Oblast, in Donbass. The Ukrainians are becoming more and more active. I can see it personally. And last thing is just I want to go over Bakhmut. Ukraine doesn't control much of Bakhmut at this point, and so there is reports that the Ukrainian forces did do a small counteroffensive today, and they managed to kind of just push the Russians out. But you can see that even with that, it's just a tactic to stall the Russians. That's as of the 22nd, but you can see that as of May 1st, the Russians control pretty much the vast majority of the city. There isn't much left. Let's be honest, Bakhmut has been completely pulverized by the Russians. They've destroyed the city completely. So even if they capture it, there isn't much to be happy about or proud of because they capture it by completely destroying it. And so what Ukraine really controls here is just a small little sector west of Bakhmut. So again, it's nothing crazy, but even if they manage to pull off, according to the rumors and reports, to push the Russians a little bit within east of Bakhmut, it's not that much. So that's the situation. Again, another report, it's a rumor, but the Russian military bloggers have been reporting that close to New York, yes, there is a New York in Ukraine, and the Ukrainians pulled off a successful counteroffensive, and they got as close as to Troitske, about 1.5 kilometers in here. Now, it's not reflected on Deep State because it needs to be confirmed, but if the Russians are starting to talk about it, that means that it must be true. And there was also a video of the Ukrainian forces. They They posted that video today of one successful counteroffensive that they pulled off around Avdiivka. So it could be this one. But overall, it's small movements. It's nothing crazy. And I'm expecting far more activity in the next few weeks as we get closer and closer to warmer weather. So that's that for the map. I'm not going to go into more detail since there hasn't been that many news. So let's go into the next slide. And this is a very cool and interesting article from The Telegraph. And here, the title of this article is that Putin claims he's canceling public celebrations over safety fears, but the truth is far more humiliating. And so I'm going to read this article to you. So the banning of public events during the May holidays is less likely to be out of concern for citizens' safety and more to do with Putin's paranoid obsession with shutting down any channel of criticism of his war, even if open support for Ukraine is tiny and the threat of a popular uprising very remote. At the same time, that public protest is being preemptively suppressed. Dissent and conflict continues to grow in the military circles. In a 90-minute interview with a military blogger on April 29th, a few days ago, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the de facto leader of the Wagner private military company, bemoaned the catastrophic state of the Russian army and said that the time has come when we have to stop lying to the population of the Russian Federation, saying that everything is okay. He sarcastically called the war in Ukraine the so-called special military operation in the veiled criticism of Putin's ban on the use of the word war to describe events in Ukraine. Prigozhin also criticized the defense ministry for withholding ammunition and threatened to withdraw his men from the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut, which Russia has been trying to take for 9 months. That's almost 10 months. Russia, again, is still pretending there are no problems to this day and avoids the reality at all costs. Just like a debtor avoids their financial obligations, right? Never opening their debt letters and what they owe, they just completely avoid that. And so in reality, that's only making things worse, because once the reality really is going to hit them and the population is going to rise up, it's going to fall like a set of dominoes, as you can see here. So that's good news because, again, authoritarian regimes are very inflexible to change, and they do not take criticism very well, and they often just disregard it. And they disregard it by even oppressing further the people that criticize them, instead of really looking at themselves and saying, you know what, there's some room for improvement here, or we can do better. Let's do things differently. That's just not going to happen here. And so that's good news, because really, once Ukraine starts this counteroffensive and Putin just simply has no more answers at all, right? Is he going to mobilize more people? Most likely. But that's not going to change the reality of things, is that they're going to be poorly equipped, they will lack ammunition, they will not have the weapons necessary to defend themselves. And so with all that being said, it's going to start falling and crumbling very quickly in Russia. And again, I recommended you guys to watch the 3-part mini documentary that was posted by The Good and Bad Times in regards to a scenario where Russia completely collapses and divides itself in multiple states. And again, it's the imagination is playing here, but it's a very likely scenario where we could see Russia really crumbling into different countries, right? And so that's going to be another issue to deal with, because we have a massive country with a huge arsenal of nuclear weapons that we're going to have to somehow stabilize, right? And make sure that this doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Anyways, in the next slide, also today there was a massive news that came out where essentially the United States confirms, at least according to their conservative figures, that the Russian winter offensive backfired, to say the least, as its forces suffered more than 100,000 casualties since December, according to the new estimated figures announced by the Biden administration on Monday. So the White House official John Kirby told reporters Russia has exhausted its military stockpiles and its armed forces, and the U.S. estimates more than 20,000 of its troops have been killed in action in recent months, so around late December, early January. So in less than 4 months, these are conservative figures. Again, this could be way worse than 20,000 dead and 100,000 casualties. And so obviously the US defines casualty as wounded or killed. So it could be wounded, missing in action, killed, And also to keep in mind, I've talked about Bakhmut and the Ukraine's retreating, but here, one of the spokesperson for the 46th Air Mobile Brigade of the Ukrainian Army indicated that immediately behind Bakhmut, there's new frontiers of defenses that are awaiting the Wagner and the Russian soldiers. So the war will move from urban conditions to the field, which is even worse because now the Russians are not going to have anything to hide in, right? It's going to be just open fields and very little force cover. And so overall, this is conservative figures that have been provided by the United States, and we know that usually this could be way worse. We've seen the videos, we've seen the footage, the images of the amount of losses the Russians have incurred since January of this year, right? Especially around Bakhmut and Vuhledar. Boy, Vuhledar has been a complete enormous catastrophe for the Russians, and I don't shy away from mentioning that every single video. Vuhledar was one of their biggest failures ever. The amount of men they've thrown just to take that city, the equipment, the vehicles, to basically achieve absolutely nothing is insane, to the point that they had to demote and remove the commander Muradov because he did such a terrible job at commanding his forces there. And so this proves yet again that Russia has reached its limits and they're not going to be able to push further. It's just clear as day at this point, right? Russia's tried one last time in the last few months to prove that, yes, we can do it, we can push further, and they haven't been able to do that. The only successful front was Bakhmut. And even then, to take a city of that size for over, 9 to 10 months of fighting is a terrible, terrible performance. So to me, I'm feeling very confident with this counteroffensive and how quickly Russia is going to start crumbling. And it could take some time before the momentum picks up on the Ukrainian side, as we've seen with the Kherson offensive. But I think once Ukraine really starts seeing a lot of success, these lines of defenses they built all throughout Zaporizhia, Donbass, it's going to start just really crumbling quickly. Now, I am trying now to do positive posts at the end of my videos. And so every time I want to finish my videos with a good note. And so for today's positive post of today, some good news coming out of Kyiv. So Kyiv's population has almost returned to its pre-war numbers. So most people have returned to Kyiv. The number of residents prior to the war was about 3.9 million. And now currently, according to the mayor's advisor, Dmitro Bilotserkovets, there's around 3.6 million people right now residing in Kyiv. So it's still not to the same level pre-war, but you can see that there's a positive trend of Ukrainian people returning back home. Although that is obviously not going to be the case for many other cities in Donbass that have absolutely been pulverized, aka Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Marinka, the list goes on here, unfortunately. But at least, the capital Kyiv, the center of the Kievan Rus, right? It's a very historical city. People have faith in Ukraine winning this, and a lot of Ukrainians came back home. So that's really, really good news. So that's it, guys. Please let me know when you're expecting this counteroffensive to officially start. Do you think it's going to be like one, huge day when there's going to be massive explosions everywhere throughout Russia and the occupied territories, or you think it's just going to be a slow, sort of progressive accumulation of activity in the occupied territories from the Ukrainian side? I'm curious to know your thoughts about it, and I will see you guys in the next video, and probably this weekend. So thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you soon. Take care.